Hello and welcome. Got me. As Jeremy mentioned, I am Meredith Tehan, SVP of Sales here at Cognitiv. And I am so honored and super excited to be here today with all of you. So thank you for showing up. Thanks to marketing and our partners, 23 Layers, for an absolute incredible event. Huge shout out. And I'm honored to be here with friends and colleagues and really bright minds. And so I want to have them introduce themselves. We're going to go through and kick it off with a couple different topics that we've identified. And then we'll have some definitely some conversation. And I think it's going to make for a really fun night. So I'll start right here.
All right, thanks Meredith. Hello, my name is Eli Harris. I work for MAGNA, which is part of the IPG Media Brands family. We're sort of the centralized investment and intelligence group within IPG Media Brands. That's also where our equity investment practice sits. I've been with the group for about 8 years with a focus on equity investment, probably the youngest out of all the group here. I think I'm going on 6 months, youngest in tenure I met.
Good man.
Hello, I'm Albert Thompson. I'm the Managing Director of Digital Innovation at Walton Isaacson. Been at the agency, this is year 16 for me. It is a culture-first agency, do a lot of multicultural work. And yeah, happy to be here. And you know, low-key, the Prog IO presentation that I gave yesterday was actually inspired by the business case of Cognitiv. So absolute pleasure to be here.
Awesome. My name is Duryea Ruffins. You can call me D for short. It's a lot easier than Duryea. I work with Spark Foundry, part of Publicis, and within Spark, I run our multicultural practice, which is called Cultural Quotient, CQ for short. Excited to be here today and looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you and welcome. I think that there's a couple, we've had 2 brief conversations, this group together collectively, and it felt like we could have honestly talked all night. There's a lot of passion in the group. There's a lot to be said. There's a lot of different voices, different lenses, different perspectives. So we're again gonna have some fun. But I think that we found and identified really 3 main themes that continue to come up with everybody. And the first of those, and I'll introduce them, and then we'll sort of go one by one here. But the first of those is going to be the idea of mirroring. Does the spend, does the creative, does the strategy, does the targeting, does it really reflect the consumers who are actually purchasing any given product? And that's a real question, that we have as an industry, and we need to address. And I think that oftentimes the specific consumers aren't receiving messaging in an authentic manner, but also even getting the attention that they deserve as a purchaser. So we can start off there, and I'll kick it to whoever wants to take that first one. But the following 2 we'll run through as well.
I'll start, I'm sitting next to you.
Let's do it.
I was picking on Meredith a little bit for the use of the word mirror, but the concept I'm totally bought into, which I think in my own words was...
I'm going to trademark it.
Okay, go for it. I think I said, to me, mirroring was about if the advertising, we see if the content, consumers see if the dollars we're spending are reflective of the audiences organizations or companies are trying to serve. I think the short answer to that is no, right? I think we would probably all agree with that. And although the answer is so black and white, I do think there's a lot of nuance that could get lost in that. One thing I brought up on one of our prep calls, and it could be because I'm the younger in tenure optimist, is I actually think, at least within the walls of IPG Media Brands, we have a lot of clients that are super interested in doing the right thing, that are writing the briefs to say, we want our content to be reflective of the audience we're serving. We want our dollars spent to be reflective of the communities that are buying into our brand. I love to see that, but I think we as an industry probably haven't done the best job defining what those steps are for those brands that are interested in going on the journey, but don't really know where to start. In the last 24 hours alone, I kid you not, I've received multiple briefs from multiple brands that are spending upwards of $80 million a year, and they know they should be doing the right thing. But I think the compounding issue within the media agency world is the people building the plans, the people building the strategies are also not super reflective of the communities they're attempting to serve. Yep. And I think that's where there's a major opportunity for us, where we can all make an impact, is how are we changing the way we build teams to be more reflective of that ambition?
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when I think about it, everything lives in culture. It's how we identify with ourselves, the world around us. So brands need cultural moments to be relevant, to connect with us. Other than that, it's like buying notebook paper, something very nebulous that has no emotional connection, 1000% of utility, that's obviously highly disposable and has a very limited purpose. And I remember when there were different paper companies advertising, that's how long I've been around, where that actually meant something. Now we've accelerated to a whole nother domain. So when you start to think about, if everything lives in culture, we live in culture, we make all our decisions in culture, and brands have to join us in that conversation, then why wouldn't they just mirror the culture that they have to participate in to get us to transact? It seems very obvious, but I think there are a series of biases as to why. Some of it is, it doesn't reflect my background as the person pulling the levers, so it's very personal. I used to have conversations with one of our clients. I'm like, look, you guys live in a gated community with a gated driveway and you sell on a gated retail property. Like, you don't even know what the world looks like. And look, I get it. If I had a silly amount of money, I would basically do the same thing. But it's like you have to step out and understand the culture for which you are selling through and in, to understand how disconnected you are from it. And there's only been these flashpoints where they've gotten a glimpse of it, like their kids have told them, like, Dad, Mom, like, seriously? Or it's been COVID, where everyone, the degrees of separation have disappeared and we're all on a level playing field because everybody just doesn't want to die. And life can't be about coming down to some general principle of it's survival, so we're all as one. But as soon as we come back online, see ya. And that's the thing that I see, is that I remember presenting and saying, if you're going to really do DE&I, you have to embody the same reflection in the Karate Kid. You know, when Jackie Chan is telling Will Smith's son, like, Kung Fu is in everything you do. It's in how you put the jacket on. It's how you take the jacket off. And a lot of organizations don't really understand what that means, but the ones who do don't even have to sell to us. They create these laws of attraction, and we just want them and desire them, and we spend at a high rate without even knowing. And I think people haven't really got into the basic human element of how that factors in and how that matters, to understand that you will be mirroring and not even know you're mirroring. It'll be less than a notion. It'll be like, yeah, it's just what we do.
Love it, love it. So everyone in this room, at the end of the day, is essentially chasing after client-side marketer dollars, right? To inform the advertising and marketing that we're leading. And the reality on the ground with DEI is that we all face headwinds. And so for me, I start to break it down internally at Spark, internally at Publicis, and with our clients, to frame the conversation with, like, data-driven facts. And so one of the interesting facts is, all right, so in the US today, the mass population is essentially 40% multicultural or diverse. Okay, well then if you're a marketer on the client side, you think, I can kind of put that on the back burner because 60% the majority isn't. But then when you start to dimensionalize the data and you start to look at age breaks, okay, so here we are in 2023. If you're 30 years of age or under in the US, you are the non-white diverse majority population. In 2026, if you're 40 years of age or under, you'll become the non-white diverse majority population. So that age break in the data, that's a game changer, because then all of a sudden, that multicultural diverse majority is the majority. And if you're a client, you have to give a damn, like, you have to care. And so for me, I think about it in terms of bringing facts and data in front of clients and client leads, and then breaking down what it means to moving metrics that ultimately matter. Because on the client side, you have your job in marketing because you can move the needle on sales, revenue, transactions, right? And so your current and future transactions are going to be with a 40 under diverse majority population in the US. Let's get this freaking thing going, right? And so that's kind of how I started. Easier said than done, though.
Yeah, one of the things I like about what you said is that, first of all, the 40% is leading the 60 to a degree, and that actually matters. There is a notion of leading from the back, and I think people just find that very hard to accept, but that's just real. The other thing is, sometimes the client is just a check writer. You're not the consumer, you're not the audience. That's unfortunately your job, and we've had to have the conversation where, like, you're just a check writer, dude. Like, that is over there is who we're pursuing. We're not selling you. And I think that's a hard reality for decision makers to come to. But when the faster they get to that place, the faster they move beyond their personal biases and can start moving momentum in the marketplace.
I know this isn't a question you were probably going to ask, but I have a question.
I figured this might happen.
How are you having that conversation? Like, how are you getting them to not be a case study of one when it comes to like approving an equity plan?
I've had to do it in moments where I know it could serve it up, almost under the notion of misdirection. Like, I think with a lot of the issues around YouTube and brand safety, in particular when the terrorist content popped, the client was like, hey, we think we need to pull this down. I'm like, why? The incidence level of our multicultural ad based on the budget you gave us to show up around terrorist content is 1/1,000,000th. Can you count the decimals? Like, you want me to pause it for 1/1,000,000th? And they were like, well, now that you statistically said that, no. And I'm like, now, if you gave us more money, then maybe this is a conversation worth having. And here's what I said. I said, our targeting is so precise because we're looking for somebody Black, affluent, who's going to buy a $50,000 product. I said, this is what I said, we're targeting people who live in a gated driveway, in a gated community, in a gated neighborhood, in a gated region. And they were like, I understand your point. I'm like, it's not even gonna happen. Like, we're so far down the funnel, they may not have looked at terrorist content for like 3 months. Like, it's so far removed because of the precision match of behaviors to ping them in the moment. It's actually just not a thing. And that is how I know what I wanna say, but I have to find some market activity or societal incident to then thread it through and serve it then, because then they feel like it's attached to that. But I was really trying to just, like, I couldn't tell you in the meeting last week, you're just a check writer. So that's how I had to be sort of creative about helping them understand their place as it pertains to the media plan. It's like, I understand we're having business meetings, but when I get to the flowchart level, you're not on the flowchart. And then I think they've understood their place, and they're like, okay, you're right. I don't even want to be that far in the weeds. Thank you for explaining it, but I'll happily go back to my gated driveway.
All very good points, and I think, Eli, the next topic we have here sort of answers a little bit of that question of how do you begin, how do you start. But the next topic or I think theme that came up in our conversations was all about an entry point. So how do you start to understand different groups differently? How can you understand them more effectively, produce authentic creatives that speak to them and that reflect those consumers? But also, it's not just about a one-off test when sales are really good and budgets are looking good, and it's like, let's test this, but then let's pull it back out. DE&I, it needs to be at the center of a product, the center of activation, the center of and a continuous effort as well. So I think, like, thinking of a way of having an entry point, if you could think of one, maybe Albert or Duryea, Eli, what is the entry point for your brands to?
Yeah, do it. Jump in on this. We started on this side and then rotated back to the other side.
That's only fair.
All right. So for those of us who work at agencies, live at agencies, they're cousins of each other, and essentially you're creating a framework that allows you to have a conversation with the marketer about audience and outcome opportunity. And so at the core of whatever framework you're using, inclusivity should be at the core. And when you frame it that way, and you follow it up with like the facts in terms of like, hey, Gen Z, the most diverse audience out there, millennials who we're chasing, these are very diverse cohorts, we want to get them. Then I've had success recently in terms of like entry points with content. I mean, he just mentioned culture, right? There is no content without culture. And so whether you want to call it branded content, custom content, but the opportunity to be ideas-based as a marketer that aligns to a brief, that aligns to a partnership with a publisher that allows you to bring your brand into culture, that's like holy grail. That's what we're here for. And so I would raise my hand and say, yeah, content is that is a way in with a client, and it kind of elevates it beyond the spots and dots of my video impressions or my TV reach. And we're all in this thing because we're creative based. It's advertising, for Christ's sakes. Let's go have some gosh dang it fun. Content allows you to do so.
Right. Yeah, I think when I think about entry points, and I'll get a little bit more literal, you got to do very simple, turnkey, high touch. Do an event. But be very clear. In the beginning, you have to be led. If you do an event, somebody's going to put it on related to the audience you're going after. They're going to curate the experience. They're going to help get the audience there. They're in control. You're going to be a listening brand. You're going to show up, participate, be visible, but literally understand. And I think some of the early events we did for Lexus, they were called listening lounges. So you go, it's a happy hour, but there's an artist who comes and performs. So you get a free performance, maybe 3, 4, 5 songs, somebody notable rising star for free. Like, that's not bad. And this was over a decade and a half ago. And people were like, wow, Japanese company shows up to speak to black people like that? I'm in. I mean, it was so unconventional. It was like, wow. And there are domestic brands who've been there longer doing multicultural, didn't even do stuff like that. You know, that culminated, you know, and that moved to bigger stuff later, where we did shows for them. We did a spoken word TV show. We did a racing show. All those are firsts, period. The only other people who did that are media partners, not an agency. But we convinced them because they trusted us, because we had a lens in. Other thing is influencer marketing. And again, the influencer is going to take the cadence. They're going to set the content, the creative, the narrative, the tone, and you're going to learn how to speak to this audience because you're going to trust that they're going to be the ambassador to actually do it. You can see with the level of engagement, receptivity to it, and then do it again, and you can start to be taught. I think brands need to find ways, or even agencies who don't do this well, how can we be taught to enlist an entity who's going to pull us through, shepherd it, because this is what they do. So we can start to understand how to better navigate to get to a place where you can execute to a degree in isolation. But we had always talked about, you need to find a partner that this is what they do all day long. Stop making the assumption you have to do it yourself. And I get it for brands who can't hire a multicultural agency or an agency that requires this kind of payroll. But there are still entities who will take you into the space because they're just proud and floored that you care enough to want to, that they will lead you into it. I think there's just not enough discovery and curiosity to find people who will lead you into a cultural space to do it. I mean, the LGBTQ opportunity was basically built off GLAAD and HRC as a starting point. And we've had clients do the same, where they did it for years before they even hard sold one single product, till they earned the right. But that was the voice. So those organizations are very passionate. This is what they do. That's their cause, it's their mission, it's their job. They can take you into the space because you still have to get along before people go along. And I think people think you can move right to a P&L conversation. And it's like, no, you actually have to be liked. It's just like the playground. They don't like you, then I'm sorry, because you had to say your name is D at the playground. And they're like, you're what?
It's true, it's true.
But you have to find ways, find bridges that will make you allow people to go along or get along first before they go along. And that's just very simple. I don't know why people can't apply the 5th grade math to $1 billion business. It's still the same. It's still people, and that's just how people work.
So interesting.
I see why we went this way, because y'all gave all the great answers already. But the two things I was going to talk about, the first around entry point, I think when we talk about entry points, a lot of the conversation tends to be tied to what's the campaign? What's the execution? But I never believe the entry point is the campaign or the execution. The entry point is listening and figuring out how can you enter a conversation with authority and authenticity. And I think a lot of brands skip over that step.
Yeah.
But the brands that get it right are the brands that grow, especially with younger audiences. I was going to dovetail that into your point around influencers. I think the brands that are doing it well in the last, 3-5 years are the brands that have figured out how to relinquish some of that control over their creative license or how they show up, to let that brand show up in different ways based on the audience that influencer, that talent is reaching. I think we all need to listen more, a lot more.
Yeah, I like what you said because it gets into basic human observation. So you and I are from, our birthplace could be 10,000 miles away, but we're obviously not so different. Both of us have our hair faded, both got double ear piercing.
Yeah.
So there's far more commonality, and you're like, well, how did we get there? And obviously it's the transference of culture that is truly global that can align us to come into a room and I 100% get that dude, doesn't even matter. But a brand needs to say, well, how's that possible? And the observation that gets into culture's movement helps sort of understand why, these dudes' playlists are 50% the same. And stylistically speaking, there are some cues that makes it say, yeah, there's a symbiotic relationship there, and it moves in an undercurrent that's below the line that we can't see, but it's very sort of present. And I think that's what brands just don't do. A lot of this is in plain sight, and I think the promise of AI is that it can be a supportive thinking entity to support human curiosity. Well, is this the thing? Like, how did they? And then deep learning is like, oh, they're both like they're like on half of their domains that they're visiting are the same, and they're still listening to the same music, and they're following some of the same people. Oh, boom, that's how it is. Like there's some basic stuff not being done that needs to be part of the formula, because that is going to be an ongoing engine that needs to be serviced that makes you more and more. I'm like, let's just be clear. We represent multicultural, but we're still learning about the cultures as they're evolving and mashing up. And there's biracialism, and the people move around the country. And now there's the subsegments of each of the cultures. So we're still being taught the business by one another and the people who are part of the populace. Like, we don't have this locked. This is a fast-moving entity, and part of the promise of tools is to accelerate learning. And that's, you just don't see that acumen to just want to like get involved and understand, as they say, the business of the business.
I want to build just two quick things really quickly. You guys are making awesome points. Thank you. This is fucking awesome. Excuse my French. Okay.
We're only recorded, Duryea. It's okay.
So two quick things. So entry points, we've covered like diverse creators, influencers, content. A massive like slice of the pie, if you will, in our business is programmatic, right? Like every client, agnostic of the vertical, a huge slice of your budget will go to audience-based decisioning programmatic. And so then when you start to unpack that, like one of the realities on the ground with reaching multicultural audiences is that there's privacy regulation in the US, right? Protecting privacy data. And so a lot of the platforms that we work in, DSPs that we leverage, that ethnicity data has been deprecated. And so, okay, enter AI, right? And contextual is the new black. And the ability to connect with multicultural audiences, that's a part of programmatic. It's a no-brainer when you start to dimensionalize the US pop being a diverse majority. So you guys have got a few ways in terms of how to connect with multicultural audiences to move the needle on outcome, whether that be content influencer creator, programmatic, AI. So we're just dropping some jewels out there today, some diamonds for you to take with you moving forward.
Well, the thing that you'll probably agree to, and you as well, is you cannot apply general market parameters to multicultural.
Thank God someone said it.
You look, if you're targeting physicians, there are way more of them than surgeons. If you're looking at the CPM on HIV, it's the highest maybe in the world. I remember when the CPM digitally was $90. Negotiated was 40. I mean, it's HIV. There are not a lot of hand raisers. Like you have to scrape through the populace to find them and bolt on the signals. It's not as complex for Black, Latino, queer, and Asian, but it's complex. So it's not a $2 CPM. It's 20. Get over it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that the revenue return isn't greater. You just need to get over the fact that some people want Honeycrisp apples. They don't want the crappy red ones that are sour and bitter. I mean, look, it's just like anytime you get into segmentation, costs go up. It's like direct mail. You add a select, cost goes up. And that's what multicultural is about. And what I've seen is companies like, our ceiling threshold is $10. I'm like, yeah, but Black consumers, $20 CPM. Like, sorry. But that's the difference when you're 1/10 the population. The cost is exponentially in reversing the fraction 2-3x more. That's just basic law of averages. And I just don't think people say that, but I've said it to clients plenty of time, like, oh, it's 15% of the population. You do know it costs more. And I give them the surgeon, or I give them the cheaper to find allergy sufferers because everybody's rubbing their nose. But to find an HIV person, do you think they're just walking around the street? What are we talking about? You look at the comparison, is like, okay, well, you want to go for a segment within a segment, then if you want to reach the transgender people within the LGBTQ, guess what? The cost goes up because they're 1/5 the acronym. Like, it's the math is not very difficult, but that's just the reality. And look, same thing with viewability. People are like, oh, we need viewability 100%. I'm like, well, you get 100% on Yahoo. They got 200 million web pages. BET.com has 6 million. So guess what? The number of pages that are 100% viewability is a fraction of Yahoo.com, period. So you have to lower the viewability. And viewability does not mean credibility and connecting to the culture. Has nothing to do with it whatsoever. So a lot of these things that govern our industry have nothing to do with whether an ethnic consumer will buy product X. It's some other provision written on different rules of engagement that do not apply to the multicultural rules of engagement. And as I like to say, you're just messing up the game. People just need to get out the game.
I think that's also part of entry point. Sorry to cut you
Yeah,
off.
please go ahead, Eli.
I think like defining the rules of engagement is something that should also be considered from the onset versus like, oh, we did this big plan for you, we did all this big investment, and it's not delivering the $5 ROI you're used to.
Which is a great segue into our final theme, one of our many themes. We could go all night if you all have all night. Which is accountability and the piece that it maybe it costs more, maybe there's no measurement, maybe there's no clear understanding, maybe you just test it and it doesn't give you the immediate results, but there's been no time to maybe build, and build on your efforts, and so you're not going to get the same return, and you can't hold it accountable to the same metrics, which I think is a really, really crucial piece as well. So I'll float that out to y'all.
All right, I'll just jump in. So one thing I don't think we've talked about in detail tonight so far is like on the measurement side of the house, right? And that ties to accountability. So like we all want to drive agency accountability and client accountability to enhancing more sustainable and equitable opportunity for diverse creators, diverse influencers, diverse owned publishers, diverse targeted. And so one thing I've been hot on lately is let's make sure that we have a learning agenda measurement plan tied to everything that we do through the lens of multicultural. And let's find the right partners, whether it's Dynata or other, that can help us to bring some data-driven results back to our clients. This whole thing that we're into, this entire ad game comes down to like building brand love, right? We want to build the brand and drive demand. And so if we can reinforce that with measurement that shows, hey, we may not have seen the transactional revenue or purchases, but we're starting to see the brand love, the awareness to consideration, to engagement to purchase. I think we're well on our way. And we're all at this unique time and point today where the US has never been as diverse as it is, right? And so over time, more and more of our clients and our agency leads are starting to get it. Conversations like this help. Let's go.
Yeah, I love a lot of the things you said, because you have to develop a separated measurement criteria for multicultural that, again, is not based on a general market framework that's a different population size, has different patterns and belief. A lot on the multicultural side, we know the products weren't made for us. And some brands were silly enough to put that in print, and then we turn them off, and now they're only at outlet malls. That's the price it's paid. But the reality of it is if we know it's not necessarily designed for us, we're going to take a lot longer to consider, which means you're going to have to spend in and invest more to get us to get on the level. So there is some level of conversion. And I think there's just a belief, well, we're speaking to you, so you just buy it. No. Like the multicultural swim is very, very much informed, and we have natural filters on everything, in particular the notion of what is biased against us. And that's even down to the product level. Doesn't matter if it's a snack bar or cereal, we can look at it and be like, that's not for us, they're not speaking to us. Even if we then adopt it later. So all these factors have to be taken into place, because it may mean that the tactics executed have to be different. There has to be a different media mix. Like we are very much, product needs to be socialized, then we'll buy, which is like, hey, you got to do influencer and social before you start running programmatic, because then that lifts that. I mean, and I think there's some of these dynamics just don't come into play in the planning approach to understand, well, how do we get them essentially on rails, or just study other brands who've done it well and just mirror it, for anything. So I think that's what needs to be done. You have to have a separate KPI structure, not only planning and media math structure, but KPI structure and business outcome structure, to then figure out how to shape the pie. And then you can get to a place where contribution should match investment. If they contribute 40%, don't spend 2%, don't spend 5%. Yep. At some point, we will figure it out. We will do the math. It will make other decisions.
Eli?
I have an answer, but it's Q&A time.
No, it's not. Sarah, turn that around. Eli, come on. We'll give Eli 1 minute, and then I have a couple things, and then we'll do Q&A. Sarah, thank you. Okay,
cool. I'm going to talk through a healthcare example. We have a lot of healthcare at IPG Media Brands, if you didn't know that. A journey we've been taking a few of our brands on a one-to-one basis over about the last year and a half is helping them understand if their audience is who they say it is. Let's use Black men as an example. How their media optimization over the past year and how their KPI measurement over the past year how that's actually affected who they're targeting. And more often than not, what we're finding is the target audience that they want to go after, mid-flight, it's being optimized away to, because the cost per acquisition for that ideal audience member is a lot higher. And obviously these automation tools are optimizing towards efficiency. So we end up in this situation where we're exacerbating a problem. So I kind of already mentioned it, but just to kind of like play it out in more detail, we're actually taking the brands on that journey to go, if you're dealing with the skeptical black male who has much more mental hoops to jump through to determine, am I gonna go to that doctor? Do I believe that doctor? Am I gonna fill that script that doctor gave me? It's a lot different than, I'm gonna generalize white men, sorry Graham, and everyone else. If you go to your doctor and he tells you to get a script, you're probably gonna go get that script, right?
Yeah.
So what we've been doing is actually, customizing the KPI measurements. So sure, with general market, perhaps it is more of a third-party Crossix measured approach to script lift, but with a black male consumer, perhaps it's office visitation. And you take them on that journey, you show them, this is our new KPI, this is how it's feeding the optimization. Oh, weird, we're optimizing into our target audience even more? Who would have thought? We're trying to do that more on a one-to-one basis because we've created the infrastructure, we've told the story, we just need to prove it. We need to prove it to everyone. And I think that just takes time, energy, and a lot of energy. I'll leave it there.
I like what you said about that because we know clinical trials, by and large in this country, were developed for white males. And look, white women know that as well. But let's be clear who is the leading voice for us to get our stuff together, and it's women. So it's like, we know you haven't studied this, you didn't want to, there's the apprehension. It's these small threads and nuggets that mean everything about behavioral intent that set the stage for what you're up against when you turn a campaign on. I think stuff like that is being missed. If you know that, you're like, okay, so what is it gonna take us as Big Pharma to get over the hurdle? And I think there's intentionality in people understanding that, and other people are totally blank. Like, they act like that's not really a thing, and that, like, no, that is the thing. And if you look at it categorically, you go into banking, you go into finance, you go into wealth building, like it's littered through all of them.
Yeah.
So that's what hasn't been reconstructed.
Yeah, all very good points. I mean, what I'm hearing is the lack of listening, the lack of understanding, and then the lack of what we just talked about, accountability. And there is a cost ultimately to bridging that gap, and that needs to be invested in and in continued investment. All right, so we'll finish up here, and then we'll do some Q&A. The final things I'll leave you with today, overall from our conversations, and I think what you've heard today from this incredible panel, brands need to better understand the opportunity, of course, on the purchasing power of this diverse group. Duryea said, it's everybody, soon everybody under 40 is no longer going to be Caucasian. There's a massive opportunity, but I think beyond that, I have a feeling these brands that have their loyal consumers don't understand the vulnerability of their actual loyal audience, and that's a big one as well. Because now, tools like AI, what we're doing, people can raise their hands, they're more easily identifiable, reachable, influenceable, and you think of yourself as a consumer, will you remain loyal? When you're not being spoken to in a meaningful and authentic manner? Likely not, when you have a better option. So let's give it up for the panel, and we'll do some Q&A. Well done.
Great job, Mary.
Oh, Jeremy has a question. Our CEO.
I have a question out of me. So, something I've been wondering is, have you seen an effect from sort of the anti-woke movement that's going through brands' consideration right now, like the Anheuser-Busch issue, like trying to reach more diverse audiences for some brands? It seems to be risky now for them. They seem to think it's risky. Has that been a problem?
Yep. It's a problem for sure. So, I mean, the most direct way for me to answer your question is, it's a reality on the ground. I don't care what agency you work at, ND or holding company, it's there. I mean, we live in a world where we try to separate marketing from politics, right? But at the end of the day, it's in the same pond, if you will. I can only speak on behalf of Spark, being part of Publicis. We have the Once and For All Coalition, right? And the Once and For All Coalition essentially is a thought leadership group of client-side marketers, publishers, technologists that are together to create a more sustainable and equitable, diverse marketing ecosystem moving forward. And so not all of our clients are part of the coalition, but there are many that are, and that share that same mindset, that same sentiment. But look, we've got to be really careful also about the moves that we make, how we do it, just given the world that we live in. And it's only going to be more and more and more divided over time. And so, I mean, it's like, to answer your question, yes, it's out there, it's a challenge, it's a headwind that we face, and we're really thoughtful about, how we address it, how we continue to move everything forward.
Yeah, I'd say same for us too. I mean, our agency is unique in the fact that it's run by, a queer Black male. So I think he's out in front of our clients respectfully talking about, look, you can't take your foot off the throttle. We can help you navigate through it, but you can't defect. You'll get penalized, and then all what we've done for the past decade will be for naught. And that's with a luxury car brand and with probably the top QSR globally. The thing that helps about his position is that they know he lives the culture and would never let prize clients be collateral damage in a greater societal issue. I think what we've done is made some quiet movements around how we've stayed the course, but not overly PR'd it. And I think that notion is the agency layer of brand safety that goes well beyond programmatic and DV in that world. It's like, what do we do now, and how do we look more like a duck in water, but the only thing that's above water is the neck? So that we're still present and visible, but we're making moves underneath that protect the interests of the brand for the long view, because the brand has other interests. They all do. And there are other stakeholders and masters they have to answer to. So I understand the dynamic they're managing. But we've been pretty methodical about staying in the game, but not like jumping up and down with the pom-poms the way we used to. It's like we're still on the field of play. We're still supporting, still making movements. We're still trying to move this consumer in the marketplace to buy the client's products. But we're not doing it in an overly verbose and rah-rah sort of manner. We kind of buttoned it up like suits and said, okay, let's go back to kind of how we started. A little bit of a quieter voice, buttoned up like it's a business case, less of so celebratory that would sort of raise too much attention when even as an organization they haven't gotten their general counsel together to figure out if this hits the fan, then what do we do as a next step?
I can answer it, but
Yeah, please. if you'd like
I think
to.
it's safe to say that the client base of Walton Isaacson is probably a bit more proficient when it comes to multicultural marketing than the client base of IPG media brands. And for that reason, I think that we actually haven't seen a ton of drop off. I just looked at our latest reporting this morning, and we're actually up for the last couple of months, both in direct and in addressable. I think the reason for that, though, is more because we're not making a big song and dance about the fact that we're trying to be multicultural. We're trying to do it in authentic ways that don't create that noise or that rebound effect. And I think if you do it well, you can do it whilst avoiding that entire anti-woke campaign movement, whatever you want to call it.
Great. Any other questions? Come on, somebody out there. Okay, in the front row here.
I don't know if I need a mic, but
Sure don't.
I can hear you. I think you're on our mic.
Yeah, do you want to whisper?
a little tiny mic moment. One thing that we've talked about a lot as an industry is how brands need to lead with authenticity. And I think whenever you have a conversation around inclusivity or diversity, it's always lead with authenticity. And when you see moments like Bud Light or Pepsi so many years ago, it's because you didn't listen, you didn't consider who you were as a brand, who you were targeting. Obviously, we've got examples from years and years. Why do you think that's still a conversation, and how can we as an industry move past the authenticity argument, or not argument, but advice into actual action?
Well, I hate to beat a dead horse because I already said this, but I had a client brief come through last week. The target audience was Black and Latinx, LGBTQ or DL men, and the people pulling together the audience work, the people presenting the work, the people saying remain authentic were quite frankly all middle-aged white women, which we love, but they just don't know how to speak authentically to that audience, so they don't know what to say within the comms plan to fulfill what that messaging should be. So when it comes to being authentic, I think the brands and agencies that have these opportunities need to put the authentic people on the business to be able to answer and speak to those audiences in authentic ways. This path, as you can imagine with this team, obviously didn't lead to anywhere great. They had me as the token queer black man jump in and rebuild the plan. And all I did was reach out to my friends. Guys, who are the influencers? Where's the talent?
Yeah.
Where should we be? How should we be talking? And I think that needs to become more commonplace. You kind of made this point a little bit, but I think the bigger brands and agencies need to figure out how to tap into culture and to tap into it in sustainable ways that fuel that community. And I don't think we've quite nailed it yet.
Yeah, there's a lot of tokenizing that goes into like
100%.
Yeah, I think the friction in this world is all over influence. For all the people who have gray hair in this room, we called it power. No one wants to shift the power. If you shift the majority of the budget to multicultural, you've given the power to multicultural. People just don't want to do it. It's just full stop, that's it. I think people have to get over that's not what it's going to be. Because we don't run the companies, we don't work at the factories where they make, I mean, it's like, what are we talking about here? But that's a lot of what it is. And it's like, if I shift the power to what I know less of, I become less relevant, and it could take a life of its own, and then I'm no longer really controlling. Instead of getting out in front of leading, this is the same fear with AI. So, oh, AI is going to take your job. Yeah, if it takes your job, you were probably mediocre anyway. I mean, look, you were a commodity. I mean, look, those are just full stop. It's like you have to elevate above the tech, so that, because the machines are only as good as the people who program them. Get very good at programming it, and then you'll continuously have a job, and people will come to you and like, how do you program it? Look, if you look at it multicultural as an entity or a machine, it's only as good as the people who are programming. That's why you said in some places it sucks based on who it is, and it's like their fault. But that's the idea. People need to stop fearing and figure out how to program it better so it can move the enterprise. You will get credit for that. It didn't just happen. So I think that's what people just can't get unstuck and can't say, let's just get out in front of it and build a war chest of intelligence around this faction that is going to move the business forward, because nothing has changed. There's always something moving the business forward. It's no different than if you have to invest in a new mineral or new metal to make a product. You got to get out in front of it, because you need to know, lithium-ion batteries got to program an EV. No one's saying EV is going to, the battery's going to come get us. They're like, we got to figure out where this is going to get mined. How much it's going to cost to shove it into that car. What's the range? So that we can go make our next billion. And no one's doing the same thing with multicultural. But if you did that, and then methodically would find your way in a path to being the Jordan 1 brand that spends no money on marketing, because we all want it, but we all know who the moniker was when this all started. It's like, and that happened over 40 years. It's a shoe. If a shoe can do it, some of these other products surely can sell a candy bar and cereal better than they're selling. I'm just saying.
I'd say today we have a lot of clients across the board that leverage general market creative to reach a mass population that includes diverse audiences. And that's happening. And yet we still find ourselves talking about and begging the question, well, what about culturally relevant content and creative executions? And so we have a term called cultural fluency. And the idea behind it is that we want to democratize across the board, at Spark within Publicis. And then, okay, how do you arrive at that? Well, then it comes down to insights. It's like the best work any of us have ever seen. It's born out of insanely rich insights, right? And so then for us, what that means, it's people plugged into the business that represent our multicultural practice that can bring those insights forward. And I think the more insights-based we can be with the work, the more culturally relevant the product is, and then the more we're moving the needle on outcomes, and this whole thing just seamlessly works.
Well said. I think we probably have time for one last question, if we have any in the audience. Over here.
First off, thanks guys for spending your time to walk us through all this really important information. I do love the point about the measurement that was made earlier. It's definitely one of the pain points, from an agency perspective, to address multicultural issues. I don't know how you guys in the past year have talked to the Dynadas, the Cantors of the world, of how to improve that authenticity of a multicultural survey. Because when I go to them, it's still the same audience profile questions. What's your household income? How many people are in your house? How do we get beyond those generic questions that you would get from a Survey Monkey question, let alone something we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on, to be relevant for the people actually answering that survey?
Yeah, do it.
I'm only jumping the shark because I got to leave. Data layering. No tech stack, no company has all the inputs and information. You need third-party data. We would track store visitation for 7 years because I want to know the clip for which somebody Black, Latino, or queer visits where the product is sold, period. Clicks are great. 99% of the money is made at retail. You got to measure store visitation. Search enhanced data. Search is the greatest measure intent, one of the greatest, other than going there. So they say it's number 2. You got to layer on like cross-pixel data. Has someone searched for this product, this category, these competitors, period. If they're not, who says there's even intent? People just don't want to do it. Why? The CPM goes up, which again defies the large-time general market model around programmatic. Well, I don't want to increase the CPM $1. Why? You want to intelligent run a campaign, or you want to cheap your way to it? Gum obviously offers that. Contextual. Are they reading and researching the information? Like, I need to layer that on. I would layer on, even in programmatic, 5 or 6 layers. Yes, it's work. People just don't want to work. And I would tell the client, well, your CPM's higher. I said, yeah, because I'm laying on store visitation, because you only sell at one place, unless you sell online. Okay, you don't deliver hamburgers over the internet. Okay, fine. So I need people who have searched for your brand and competitors. Those are the people who are going to buy your sandwich, right? Yes. Got to layer that on. And I would go down the line. They were like, and look, when I put it literally on a slide, and it'd be 10 data layers, 3 different to 5 different companies outside the stack. And like, that's what multicultural is, because you need all the intimate inputs. Then you can measure against all those inputs with greater precision. People just don't want to do it. I've heard agencies like, well, we don't want to do that. Why? Our CPM goes up. And you want to be good at this? So you have to start to look at who has specific data related to the consumer purchase intent and behavior. And largely, it's an outside company. You got to do an integration. SDK. It's not that hard. People just don't want to do it because it's work. But that's how we've gotten very good with the small set of partners who are willing. And it's a small set that are willing. Everybody wants. Nobody's willing. And then you come up with a wholly different measurement criteria related to multicultural that's totally separate from general market. And it's a totally different now business conversation, because you basically in the soup kitchen become your own little kitchen chemist related to how to succeed. Clients respect that. You know what they see? Diligence. They see commitment, long haul, trajectory, all the things that say, yeah, we're going to be spending and doing business for a long time. Clients look for signaling. To what degree you have intelligence on the level, and you will continue to feed that and feed them. If you don't have it, they're going to tap out. You'll be on what I call borrowed time. You know, like when a woman says a man is on borrowed time, you will be on borrowed time. It's just the facts. Look, you gotta remember, it's people. This is what people do. It's how people make decisions. So I give you that big metadata, data layering, whatever acronym you gotta do to take back in to get it done. That is what no one wants to do it. And a lot of the ad tech companies, DSPs, they don't even want to do that. Half the time they don't know what you're talking about. It exists. You just gotta find the people who are like, yeah, let's do that.
I love it. I love it. I know we have to wrap here, but please stay. We have questions. We can do some mingling and some additional questions. Another round of applause, please, for the panel. Thank you for joining us.